Hey guys, so we are remote learning right now, and I wanted to make a few video lectures to help us stay on task a little bit. So I wanted to draw your attention to this review slide right here, which you can find in your notes, and it has terms on it that are from Unit 2, Part 1. And the reason for that is because at the conclusion of this unit, we are going to have an exam, and I wanted to make sure that you are periodically drawing your attention to things that we've already covered so that at the end you aren't cramming to try to get all of that information back into your head for the unit exam. So every, so often you will see a review slide that looks like this, and I just want you to pause and try to, refresh your memory, see if you remember these things, see if you need to go over them a little bit more. So to move on, we remember that reform means to change for the better. And there's a lot of society that really needs to be changed during the progressive era. There are a wide variety of ills that have stemmed from industrialization in the United States, and a lot of this is really focused around cities. Now, the reason that 50% of Americans lived in cities by the 1920s is because that was a common place for immigrants to stop once they came over to America. Also, most of the manufacturing jobs were also centered around the cities, and therefore, when people wanted to find industrial work, they had to flock to cities. Now, these cities are growing much faster than the existing infrastructure could provide. That is why we know that so many people were living in overcrowded tenements that did not have running water or electricity. There were no proper waste disposal programs for these cities. There were inadequate firemen and police forces. It was really just a really unhappy place to be because it was unsanitary and it was unsafe all around. The cities were not nice places. So some of the most important housing reforms to occur were really centered around the tenements. As you remember from what we looked at with Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives, the tenements were extremely unsavory. There was a lot of disease, they were dark, they were crowded, they smelled, they were dank, and of course, they're unsafe. They are known for being fire hazards because of how crowded they are and for the fact that they don't have fire escapes or anything like that. So the Tenement Act of 1901 is very important to us because it makes a lot of changes that protect people that live in these housing units. So this particular law is going to force landlords to make sure that there are fire escapes installed so that people could escape in case of a fire. They also are required to have lighting in all public areas, such as hallways, and there has to be at least one toilet available for every 2 families. Now, by today's standards, this sounds pretty horrible because a lot of us get all butthurt if we don't have our own bathroom. But back then, when people were going potty in a bucket and dumping it, one toilet for 2 families is like living the life. Now, because we have all of these changes being made, we're also going to see that the death rate is going to decrease in these cities. Now, the reason for this is because it is much more hygienic to have a toilet and running water than it is to literally go to the bathroom in a bucket, especially when it is crowded and otherwise dirty within these tenements. So if you're looking at this chart, it shows the number of deaths per 1,000 population in New York City. The years go from 1800 to 2010. Around the time that the Tenement Act of 1901 was passed, you will see a stark drop in the number of deaths. We do see another spike around 1920, but that has to do with the flu that comes about after World War I, which, by the way, secondary issue. Now, along with reforming the housing situation, progressives were also worried about the workplace. One of the biggest problems, as you remember from a previous assignment that I shared with you, child labor was a big, big deal during the industrial age. So by the end of the 1800s, people had started making labor unions for themselves, but nobody was advocating for the rights of children. Up until that point, people were only really worried about adult male men. But in 1904, a woman named Florence Kelley started the National Child Labor Committee, and she was campaigning for the end of child labor. So unfortunately, while she is not 100% successful in ending child labor, they are able to shorten the days. And progressives work together to shorten the workday from 16 hours to 10 hours. I don't know about you, but 10 hours still seems pretty long to me. So if we look at this picture right here, it is the inside of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. You can see it's pretty crowded, and there are a lot of wires hanging all over the place. We see fabric all over, not much space to move around. And then we see this, dead bodies fallen from the sky. Policemen, helpless, looking up, watching them drop. Oh no, now they're in body bags. Well, what else do you do with dead people in the street? So here's what happened. As horrific as this looks, it's a true story. So the Triangle Shirtwaist Company was responsible for making a certain type of shirt, and it was extremely crowded, and it did not have the proper safety precautions that modern factories have today in the United States. So the picture on the left shows what this factory looked like while it was fully operational. The picture on the right shows what happens after a major fire catastrophe. So here's the story. There was a worker that allegedly started a fire by tossing something into a basket that had a bunch of fabric and paper in it. And so this fire is going to start on the 8th floor of this building where the Triangle Shirtwaist Company was located. Now, because they don't have fire escapes that can actually support people, and because there's no way to really get out, a lot of people died. Now, you're probably wondering, why can't they get out? Well, the owners of the factory had locked the doors because they were so worried about theft. So a lot of people were literally trapped inside. Other people did try to use the fire escapes, but because they weren't actually safe and were very flimsy, a lot of people just plummeted to their death. Other people wound up jumping out of the windows to escape the fire, but then fell to their death. Everyone else burnt alive. And this is a huge, huge disaster. Now, as I've told you guys many times in class, we often don't see laws, reform, regulations, anything like that put into place until something major happens. Triangle Shirtwaist disaster is an example of a major event that leads to reform. So because at least 140 people died, and because we know that the Triangle Shirtwaist disaster is not the only disaster of this kind, investigators soon found that the hazards that caused this disaster were commonplace all throughout New York City. And so the state of New York passed a wide variety of laws to try to reform the workplace and make it more safe. There are things now that are required, such as a maximum capacity, the most number of people that can be in a building and it still be safe. These buildings were required to have working fire escapes that were strong enough to support people that needed to quickly get out of the building. You are no longer allowed to lock your workers in. You have to have well-lit exits that show people where to go in the case of an emergency. And so New York becomes really this like beacon, this model for workplace safety all around the United States. And pretty soon, other states start to form the same type of laws to protect their workers. That is where we're going to pause right now. I think we are pretty well caught up as far as how your work assignments have fallen against lecturing. So I'm going to be back on Monday with another lecture to give you guys some more information to help you with your subsequent assignments. We are going to continue talking about the progressive era. We do need to talk about things like suffrage, which is women's right to vote, and we need to talk about Teddy Roosevelt, which is actually a super fascinating topic. So if you guys have any questions, please email me. I also want to make sure that you guys are turning in your assignments. While I am not assigning anything new today, there are many, many of you that are missing a lot of work. And I really want you to work on getting that caught up and turned in. Again, if you need me, you know where to find me. While you guys are at home, I'm going to be right here. Have a great day. Be safe.